I stared at the wedding invitation in my hands, its silver foil lettering catching the light from my office window at City Hall. Oliver and Penelope joyfully request your presence. My breath caught in my throat. My brother's wedding, the social event of the season in Willowbrook. According to my mother's increasingly frequent text messages, she'd been planning this affair for months, ever since Oliver announced his engagement to Penelope Blackwood, daughter of Willowbrook's wealthiest, real estate developer and my family's longtime social rival. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The thick cream envelope had arrived with a handwritten note. From my mother. Elena, please try to dress appropriately, and come alone. We've told everyone you're between relationships right now. I laughed bitterly, running my thumb over the embossed family crest on the envelope, a symbol I'd been told repeatedly I had no right to claim as my own. Outside my office window, the Willowbrook town square bustled with the usual Saturday morning activity. Street vendors setting up for the farmers' market, families strolling along the cobblestone paths, tourists taking photos of our historic courthouse, all of it visible from my corner office, the office my family didn't know I had. Simmy's. Lancaster? My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Councilman Reeves is here for your 10 o'clock. Thank you, Diane. Send him in. I slipped the invitation into my desk drawer, right next to the engagement ring I'd been hiding for 3 months, the one my family had no idea existed, from the man they had no idea I was seeing. The wall of family photos behind Councilman Reeves caught my eye as he entered. All of Oliver's graduations, award ceremonies, and professional accomplishments. Not a single picture of me. To the Lancaster family, I was the perpetual disappointment, the daughter who'd chosen public service over the family's banking empire. Elena, Reeves said, settling into the chair across from me. The Budget Committee approved your proposal for the downtown revitalization project. Blackwood Developments isn't happy about it. I couldn't help my satisfied smile. I imagine they're not. This is the 3rd project they've lost to public funding this year. Penelope's father was particularly vocal at the country club last night. Said the Lancaster girl has no idea how real business works. Reeves shrugged apologetically. His words, not mine. Of course, I nodded, used to the criticism. By real business, he means backroom deals and overpriced contracts. Reeves cleared his throat. There's also the matter of the mayoral election. The committee is unified behind you as our candidate. My heart raced. It's still 6 months away. We want to announce early, before the Blackwoods can field their own candidate. The irony wasn't lost on me. 5 years ago, when I decided to run for city council instead of accepting a VP position at Lancaster Financial, my father had practically disowned me. Politics is a fool's game, he'd said over our last family dinner. You'll be broke and forgotten within a year. My brother Oliver had laughed. City council? In Willowbrook? That's your big ambition? You could be running our Singapore office. I never told them that I'd been quietly building a coalition of small business owners, community organizers, and environmental advocates. Never mentioned that I'd helped secure millions in development grants for our once struggling downtown. Never shared that the regional press had started calling me Willowbrook's rising star. As far as my family knew, I was barely scraping by, working at some insignificant government job because I was too stubborn to admit defeat and join the family business. They assumed I lived in a small apartment on the unfashionable side of town, not the historic Victorian I'd restored near the park. They thought I drove an old economy car, not the electric vehicle I'd helped bring to our city fleet as part of our sustainability initiative. Elena? Reeves pulled me from my thoughts. There's something else. Blackwood Developments has applied for permits to convert the old library into luxury condos. It'll be announced at their charity gala next weekend. The same weekend as Oliver's wedding, I murmured. Yes, your brother's firm handled the financing. It's being treated as a major coup for Lancaster Financial. Of course it was. Oliver had always been the golden child, following in our father's footsteps without question. Every business deal was celebrated, every bonus announced at family gatherings. Meanwhile, my work to preserve Willowbrook's historic buildings and create affordable housing was dismissed as playing government. The timing isn't coincidental, Reeves continued. The Blackwoods want to announce the development the same day your brother marries into their family. A merger of money and influence. What they didn't know was that I'd already drafted legislation to designate the library as a historic landmark, which would block their development plans. The legislation was sitting in my desk drawer, waiting for the right moment. A moment that suddenly seemed perfectly aligned with my brother's wedding weekend. My phone buzzed with a text from Connor. Meeting wrapped early. Still on for lunch? Connor. Mitchell, the city's newest district attorney, Harvard law graduate, and my secret fiancé for the past 3 months. The man whose career my family had followed with interest in the society pages, never realizing he came home to me every night. The man whose grandmother's emerald ring was hidden in my desk drawer, right next to Oliver's wedding invitation. Lancaster, my assistant's voice came through the intercom again. The mayor's office is on line 1. They're asking about your availability for the press conference on Monday. The press conference where Mayor Wilson would announce he wasn't seeking re-election and would instead endorse me as his successor. The same Mayor Wilson who would be attending Oliver's wedding as a family friend. I picked up the invitation again, running my finger over the RSVP card with its single checkbox. No +1 option for poor, perpetually single Elena. Tell the mayor's office I'll be there, I said to my assistant, then turned back to Councilman Reeves. And tell the committee I accept their endorsement. It's time Willowbrook knew exactly who I am. As Reeves left, I texted Connor back. Lunch sounds perfect. Also, are you free next Saturday? My brother's getting married, and I think it's time you met my family. I slipped Oliver's invitation into my purse and smiled. The wedding that was meant to unite two of Willowbrook's most powerful families was about to become something entirely different. My family thought they were gaining the Blackwoods as allies. They had no idea what, or who, they were about to lose. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The memory of my last family dinner. Before leaving Lancaster. Financial still burned fresh in my mind, even 5 years later. It was a crisp autumn evening, the kind where Willowbrook's maple trees turned the streets into corridors of gold and crimson. Mother had insisted on a formal dinner to talk sense into me after I'd submitted my resignation letter to Father's assistant earlier that day. Political aspirations? My father had scoffed, swirling his 30-year scotch in a crystal tumbler. That cost more than a month's rent in most Willowbrook apartments. Lancaster women don't run for office, Elena. They chair charity committees and organize galas. They marry men who run for office. My mother nodded in agreement, her diamond earrings catching the light from the chandelier overhead. Darling, you've always been different. But this is taking it too far. What will the Harrington girls think? Or the Blackwoods? She whispered the name like it was sacred text. The Blackwoods had been our family's social rivals for generations, though Father had been working tirelessly to change that. I don't care what they think, I'd replied, cutting into my barely touched filet mignon. Willowbrook needs council members who understand urban planning and sustainable development, not just another businessman looking to convert historic buildings into luxury condos. Oliver had laughed then, that condescending chuckle that made me want to throw my wine in his face. Urban planning? Since when are you an expert on anything beyond shopping on Newberry Avenue? Since I completed my master's in public policy while working full-time, I shot back. The degree I'd earned in secret, attending night classes while telling my family I was at charity functions. The same masters you congratulated Rebecca Thornton on last month at the club. The table went silent. My father's face darkened as he set down his scotch. This is that Mitchell boy's influence, isn't it? That crusading assistant DA who thinks he's going to clean up city politics. Connor. Even then, before we were dating, my family had associated us. We'd been photographed at the same community events, both advocating for transparency in local government. Connor has nothing to do with this, I'd said. This is my decision. A foolish one, my father had replied. Lancaster Financial has spent 4 generations building relationships with every major developer in this region. You're throwing away connections most people would kill for. Connections that benefit the Lancasters, not Willowbrook residents who can't afford 7-figure condos. Oliver had leaned forward then, his perfectly tailored suit stretching across shoulders broadened by the personal trainer father paid for. Let's be honest, Elena. You've never had the head for real business. This political phase is just another attempt to prove yourself. Like that art gallery phase in college, Mother had added with a dismissive wave. Or that summer you wanted to teach underserved children. They'd laughed, all 3 of them, sharing a moment of collective amusement at my expense. The gallery, that had actually featured 3 of my photographs in a regional exhibition. The teaching position that had inspired me to start a scholarship fund I still anonymously contributed to. Elena will come crawling back when she realizes municipal government salaries can't support her lifestyle, Oliver had predicted, raising his glass in a mock toast. 6 months, tops. I'd stared at him, memorizing the smug curve of his mouth, the absolute certainty in his eyes. You have no idea who I am, I'd said quietly, setting down my napkin and standing. None of you do. Don't be dramatic, my mother had sighed. We simply want what's best for you. No, you want what maintains appearances for you. I'd pushed my chair back and headed for the door. You'll see my resignation letter in the morning, Father. I won't be at the quarterly shareholders meeting. If you walk out that door. My father's voice had dropped to that dangerous quiet tone he used in negotiations. Don't expect the Lancaster name to open any doors for you. You'll be on your own. I'd paused in the doorway, turning back to face my family one last time. Good. Maybe then I'll finally get credit for what I accomplish. The next day, I'd moved out of my luxury apartment in Lancaster Towers and into a modest rental across town. 6 months later, I won my first election to city council. A year after that, I purchased my Victorian home with my own money. And through it all, I watched from a distance as my family continued to believe I was failing, too proud to come home. Oliver's engagement to Penelope Blackwood had been the talk of Willowbrook society for the past year. The Lancaster Blackwood wedding would unite 2 of the city's oldest families, merging old money with new development interests. Perfect for a family obsessed with legacy and appearance. I hadn't spoken to any of them since Mother's birthday gala 2 years ago, where Father had loudly offered to find me a real position at Lancaster Financial if I was tired of playing government. I'd smiled politely and declined, not mentioning that I'd just secured a $12 million federal grant for Willowbrook's infrastructure, more money than Lancaster Financial had generated in profits that quarter. The week before Oliver's wedding, I sat in Connor's kitchen, watching him make coffee as morning light streamed through the windows of his downtown loft. We'd been careful to keep our relationship private, not out of shame but strategy. Connor's anti-corruption platform had put him at odds with both the Lancasters and Blackwoods more than once. "You really want me to come to this wedding?" he asked, sliding a mug across the counter to me. "Your family doesn't even know we're dating, let alone engaged." I twisted the emerald ring on my finger, the one I only wore in private or outside Willowbrook. Oliver and Penelope invited every significant political figure in the county except me. Mayor Wilson, Judge Harrington, Senator Collins, all will be there representing their offices. You received an invitation as District Attorney Mitchell, not as my +1. Connor leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful. and Mayor Wilson's announcement about not seeking re-election is scheduled for Monday after the wedding. With his endorsement of me as his successor, I added, the timing couldn't be more perfect. Your family will be blindsided. I sipped my coffee, remembering Oliver's smug prediction about my inevitable failure. They've had 5 years to ask about my life, my career. 5 years of assuming I was struggling. Did you know Mother told her friends I had some little job at City Hall? Connor smiled. As opposed to being the youngest city council president in Willowbrook history and the architect of the downtown revitalization that saved dozens of local businesses, including Blackwood competitors, I added. Which is why Penelope's father hates me, though he's never bothered to learn my name. He just calls me that Lancaster girl causing problems downtown. Connor came around the counter and took my hands in his. Are you sure you want to do it this way? We could tell them privately before the wedding. I thought about the countless family gatherings where I'd been seated at the children's table well into my 20s. The holiday photos where Oliver stood front and center while I was positioned off to the side. The business discussions that stopped whenever I entered the room. They never gave me the dignity of taking me seriously, I said. I've earned the right to reveal myself on my terms. Besides, I smiled, tracing a finger along his jawline. Imagine their faces when the district attorney they've been courting for Oliver's corporate legal team walks in and heads straight for the Lancaster embarrassment. Connor kissed me lightly. I'm with you, whatever you decide. Though I should warn you, Mayor Wilson let slip yesterday that he's considering bumping up the announcement. My heart skipped. To when? He thinks the gathered press at the Lancaster Blackwood wedding would be the perfect backdrop. All the influential people in one place. Connor watched my expression carefully. He doesn't know about your family situation. The mayor's announcement at Oliver's wedding would be the ultimate validation and revelation rolled into one. 5 years of work culminating at the very event meant to showcase my brother's success. Tell Mayor Wilson to wait until Monday as planned, I said after a moment. The wedding should be dramatic enough without official business. I smiled. Though I can't control who recognizes the future mayor when you walk in with the current district attorney. Connor laughed. Your brother is marrying into a family that's been fighting your downtown preservation efforts for years, while dating the man who's investigated them twice for ethical violations. I don't think we'll need the mayor's announcement to make an impression. I leaned into his embrace, thinking about the seating chart Mother had undoubtedly labored over. The prominent tables for the Blackwood's social connections, the careful placement of political figures Oliver and Father wanted to impress, and somewhere in the background, a forgotten seat for the daughter who'd never lived up to the Lancaster name. They had no idea what was coming. Few people in Willowbrook knew the extent of my success, and that was by design. While I never hid my position on the city council, I had carefully maintained a low public profile, focusing on results rather than recognition. My name appeared at the bottom of press releases, never in headlines. I attended ribbon cuttings, but stood in the back row. I let others take credit when convenient, building allies instead of accolades. Not even my dedicated staff knew everything. They didn't know about the private investment firm I'd started with my city council salary, and the inheritance from my grandmother, the only Lancaster who had ever believed in me. They didn't know that Elena Lancaster Investments had purchased 3 struggling historic properties in downtown Willowbrook, renovated them with sustainable materials, and leased them at reasonable rates to local businesses. The flagship restaurant in one of my buildings, Riverstone Bistro, had just been featured in a national culinary magazine. The tech incubator in another had launched 2 successful startups now valued at over $20 million each. The third building housed affordable apartments for teachers, firefighters, and other essential workers priced out of Willowbrook's increasingly gentrified neighborhoods. My family didn't know that I lived in a meticulously restored Victorian home on Maple Avenue, a property I'd purchased when the Lancaster Bank had foreclosed on the previous owner. The previous owner, who happened to be Penelope Blackwood's cousin, who had defaulted on his loans after a failed business venture that Oliver had advised him on. The morning of Oliver's wedding, I sat in my home office, reviewing the speech Mayor Wilson and I had prepared for Monday's announcement. My campaign manager had already secured commitments from key donors, many of whom had previously supported Lancaster-backed candidates. The polling data showed I had a commanding lead over any potential challenger, including the candidate the Blackwoods were rumored to be backing. The citizens of Willowbrook deserve leadership that puts community before profit, the speech read. For too long, our city's development has been driven by outside interests rather than local needs. Irony wasn't lost on me. The outside interests referenced in my speech were primarily Lancaster Financial and Blackwood Developments, the very entities being celebrated at today's wedding. My phone buzzed with a text from Connor. "Dress looks amazing. Can't wait to see you in it, the dress." I glanced at the garment bag hanging on my closet door. Not the modest, forgettable outfit my mother had undoubtedly expected me to wear, but an elegant emerald green sheath that matched both my eyes and Connor's grandmother's ring. Designer, but subtly so. Expensive, but not flashy. The dress of a woman who knew her worth. Another text from Connor followed. "Just left meeting with Mayor Wilson. He's still pushing to make announcement today instead of Monday. Says press coverage will be better." I frowned. Mayor Wilson was right about the press coverage. All of Willowbrook's media would be at the Lancaster Blackwood wedding, but I had hoped to control the timing of my revelation. If the mayor announced his endorsement of me at the wedding, the personal and political would collide in ways even I couldn't predict. "Tell him to stick to the plan," I texted back. "Monday announcement. Today is just about family." Connor's reply came quickly. "Tried. He's bringing the press release just in case. Says opportunity too good to pass up." I sighed, setting down my phone. Mayor Wilson was a brilliant political strategist, which was why Willowbrook had flourished, under his leadership. But he didn't understand family dynamics. Not mine, anyway. My assistant Diane called as I was finishing my makeup. "Ms. Lancaster, I have those reports you requested on the Library Preservation Initiative," she said when I answered. "The Historic Preservation Committee voted unanimously in favor. They're submitting formal documentation on Monday." "Perfect. Timing," I replied. "Right after the Blackwoods announced their condo development plans." "Also," Diane continued, "Judge Harrington called. He wanted to confirm your availability for the courthouse renovation groundbreaking next week. He mentioned seeing you at the wedding today." Judge Harrington, who had been a friend of my father's for 30 years, who had no idea that I was the council member responsible for securing funding for his courthouse renovation, who probably thought I was attending the wedding as a family obligation rather than a public figure in my own right. "Tell him I look forward to seeing him there," I said. After hanging up, I scrolled through my emails one last time before the ceremony. Reports from department heads, meeting requests from community organizations, and at the bottom of my inbox, a message from Blackwood Development's PR firm with the subject line, "Confidential, Old Library Redevelopment Press Materials." They had inadvertently included me on the email chain discussing the announcement planned for the wedding reception. Attached were renderings of luxury condos where our historic library currently stood, complete with a quote from Oliver Lancaster, praising the visionary development that will elevate Willowbrook's profile. I forwarded the email to Connor with a single line, Exhibit A for why the preservation initiative is necessary. His response was immediate. "Just saw the Blackwoods arrive at the venue. Harold Blackwood is telling everyone who will listen about the major announcement during the reception." I slipped my laptop into my bag and checked my appearance one final time. The emerald dress fit perfectly. My hair was swept up in an elegant chignon. Around my neck hung a simple silver pendant. Not the Lancaster pearls my mother had insisted every Lancaster woman should wear to significant events, but a gift from Connor on our first anniversary. As I gathered my things, I noticed a small, framed newspaper clipping on my desk, my first election victory 5 years ago. The photo showed me standing on the steps of City Hall, hand raised in triumph, surrounded by supporters. It was the only political memento I displayed in my home, a reminder of the moment I'd proven to myself that I could succeed without the Lancaster name opening doors. I tucked the Historical Preservation Committee's preliminary report into my clutch bag. Not that I planned to use it, but having it gave me a certain confidence. The Blackwoods could announce their development plans, but by Monday morning, those plans would be legally challenged by the preservation initiative I'd been quietly building support for over the past year. My phone buzzed again with a series of texts from Connor. Just arrived at ceremony. Your family is greeting guests at entrance. Mayor Wilson is here with his press secretary. Your mother asked if I've seen her daughter anywhere, told her we haven't met. I smiled at the last message. My mother had likely been instructing family members to keep an eye out for me, worried I might embarrass them with some political talk or unsuitable attire. She had no idea her daughter was romantically involved with the distinguished District Attorney Mitchell, whose criminal justice reforms had made national news last year. The final text from Connor made me laugh out loud. Seating chart has me at table 1 with your parents. You're not on the chart I can see. Of course I wasn't. In the Lancaster family hierarchy, even the distant cousin who had been arrested twice for public intoxication would rank higher than the daughter who had rejected. The family business, I replied with a simple, save me a dance. Arriving in 20. The drive to Willowbrook Gardens, the exclusive venue where Oliver and Penelope had chosen to exchange vows, took exactly 17 minutes from my home. I pulled into the parking area in my understated but luxury electric sedan, another detail my family wouldn't expect. The lot was filled with high-end vehicles, many bearing the discreet window stickers of the Willowbrook Country Club. Security guards checked names against the guest list at the entrance. I provided my ID and watched as the guard's eyes widened, slightly in recognition. Council President Lancaster? He said quietly. I didn't realize you were related to the groom. He's my brother, I replied with a smile. But let's keep my title between us for now. Today, I'm just Elena. The guard nodded, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. Of course, ma'am. Though you should know, Mayor Wilson arrived a few minutes ago. He was asking if you were here yet. Thank you for the heads up, I said, slipping him my card. If you ever need anything at City Hall, call my office directly. As I walked toward the garden where the ceremony would take place, I spotted several familiar faces, business leaders I'd worked with on the downtown revitalization, journalists who had covered city council meetings, politicians from neighboring towns. All of them here to witness the Lancaster-Blackwood union, unaware that the real story might be unfolding right under their noses. I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders, channeling the confidence that had carried me through contentious council meetings and tough campaign trails. Whatever happened in the next few hours, one thing was certain. By the end of Oliver's wedding day, the Lancaster family would finally see me for who I truly was, and they would never underestimate me again. Willowbrook Gardens sprawled over 5 manicured acres at the edge of the historic district, its wrought iron gates and stone pathways exuding old-world elegance. As I approached the ceremony area, I could see that no expense had been spared for Oliver and Penelope's big day. White roses and orchids cascaded from towering arrangements. A string quartet played softly near a flower-adorned gazebo. Crystal. Glasses sparkled on tables covered in silk. The wedding coordinator intercepted me before I could enter the main seating area, her clipboard clutched tightly against her chest. "Name, please?" she asked, barely glancing up from her list. Elena Lancaster. Her eyes darted to my face, then back to her clipboard. She flipped through several pages, frowning. Lancaster. Oh. Her professional smile faltered. "You're the groom's sister." "That's right," I confirmed, watching as she seemed to struggle with some internal conflict. Ms. Lancaster, I was given specific instructions about your, seating arrangement. She lowered her voice, glancing around to ensure no one could overhear. Your mother requested that you be seated separately from the main guest area. I raised an eyebrow but kept my expression neutral. Separately? The coordinator looked deeply uncomfortable now. There's a viewing area set up in the venue's auxiliary kitchen, with a screen showing the ceremony. For, special guests. Special guests, I repeated, letting the euphemism hang in the air between us. Yes, well, she fumbled. Mrs. Lancaster explained that you might arrive late and wouldn't want to disrupt the ceremony. The kitchen has a private entrance and a clear view of my own brother's wedding through a television screen, I finished for her. How thoughtful of my mother. The coordinator shifted her weight from one foot to another. I can show you there now if you'd like. The ceremony starts in 15 minutes. I glanced past her toward the seating area, where guests in designer attire were being guided to white chairs adorned with silver ribbons. Near the front row, I spotted Connor in his perfectly tailored navy suit, engaged in conversation with Mayor Wilson. Neither had seen me yet. Actually, I said, turning back to the coordinator, I think I'll find my way. Thank you. Before she could protest, I walked decisively toward a side entrance, as if I knew exactly where I was going. Years of navigating city politics had taught me that confidence was often all you needed to access spaces others thought closed to you. Instead of heading toward the kitchen, however, I circled around to approach the seating area from another angle. From this vantage point, I could see my parents near the front, greeting important guests with practiced smiles. My mother in pale blue silk, her Lancaster pearls gleaming at her throat. My father in a bespoke suit, hand resting casually on the shoulder of Harold Blackwood, Penelope's father, as if they'd been friends for decades rather than rivals. I hung back in the shadow of a flowering dogwood tree, observing the scene unfold. Judge Harrington and his wife were being escorted to seats in the second row. The editor of the Willowbrook Gazette chatted with the president of the Chamber of Commerce. State Senator Collins arrived with his entourage, immediately surrounded by both Lancaster and Blackwood associates. And there, standing slightly apart, was Connor, now looking at his phone, undoubtedly checking for messages from me. He glanced up, scanning the arriving guests, a slight furrow of concern on his brow. I felt a rush of affection for this man, who had seen my worth from the beginning, who had never once suggested I use the Lancaster name to advance my career. I was about to step forward when a hand grabbed my elbow. Elena! My mother's voice was sharp despite her whispered tone. What are you doing here? Patricia was supposed to show you to the kitchen area. I turned to face her, noting the momentary widening of her eyes as she took in my appearance. The designer dress, the elegant hairstyle, the quiet confidence that no longer resembled the daughter she thought she knew. Hello, Mother, I said calmly. I decided I'd prefer to witness my only brother's wedding in person rather than on a television screen. Her perfectly manicured hand fluttered to her pearls. Don't be difficult, Elena. We've arranged everything perfectly. The Blackwoods have very specific expectations about the seating arrangement, and we have all the important guests positioned strategically. Important guests, I echoed. Like District Attorney Mitchell? My mother's expression brightened slightly. Yes, exactly. Oliver has been cultivating that relationship for months. The Blackwoods are very impressed that he accepted our invitation. He could be invaluable to both families' interests. I bit back a laugh. If only she knew those interests had been the subject of multiple late-night discussions in Connor's apartment, where we'd analyze the legal implications of several Lancaster-Blackwood joint ventures. The ceremony is about to begin, my mother continued, tugging gently but insistently on my arm. Patricia will show you where to go. You can join us at the reception. Later. After the important photographs and announcements. I stood my ground. I'm not sitting in the kitchen, Mother. Her pleasant expression hardened. This isn't about you, Elena. This is Oliver's day. The Blackwoods have invited the governor, for heaven's sake. We can't have you cornering people with your political agenda. My political agenda, I repeated softly. You mean my job? The position I was elected to by the citizens of Willowbrook? You know perfectly well what I mean, she hissed, glancing around to ensure no one could overhear. Your father has worked for years to repair the Lancaster-Blackwood relationship. We can't have you antagonizing Harold Blackwood with your affordable housing crusade or whatever cause you're championing this month. Before I could respond, a familiar voice called out, Mrs. Lancaster! We both turned to see Mayor Wilson approaching, his hand extended in greeting. My mother's demeanor instantly transformed, her irritation replaced by a gracious smile. Mayor Wilson, how lovely you could join us today, she gushed, taking his offered hand. Oliver will be so pleased you came. I wouldn't miss it, the mayor replied warmly. The union of two of Willowbrook's finest families is a momentous occasion. His eyes shifted to me, a twinkle of amusement visible. Ah, and here's our council president Lancaster. I've been looking for you, Elena. My mother's smile froze on her face as she glanced between us. Council president? She echoed faintly. Mayor Wilson seemed not to notice her confusion. Indeed. Your daughter has been an absolute force on the city council. Youngest president in Willowbrook history, as I'm sure you know. The downtown revitalization simply wouldn't have happened without her leadership. I watched as my mother struggled to process this information, her social training warring with her genuine shock. Elena has always been involved in civic matters, she managed finally. More than involved, Mayor Wilson continued enthusiastically. She's transformed them. That reminds me, Elena, have you had a chance to review the announcement for Monday? My press secretary has been pestering me about the final wording. I sent my notes this morning, I replied, unable to resist adding, though I still think we should wait until Monday as planned. My mother's gaze darted between us. Announcement? She asked, unable to contain her curiosity. The mayor opened, his mouth to reply, but the wedding coordinator appeared at that moment, looking flustered. Mrs. Lancaster, the ceremony is about to begin. We need you at the front immediately. She turned to Mayor Wilson with a respectful nod. Sir, your seat is in the third row, center section. Of course, he said cheerfully. We'll continue this conversation at the reception, Elena. Mrs. Lancaster, a pleasure as always. As he walked away, my mother turned to me, her composed facade cracking slightly. What announcement was he talking about, Elena? Before I could answer, the coordinator interjected. Mrs. Lancaster, please, we really must— Yes. My mother waved her away impatiently. I'm coming. She fixed me with a look that mingled confusion, suspicion, and lingering disapproval. We'll discuss this later. Please, Elena, just be discreet. Sit in the back if you won't use the viewing area. Don't draw attention to yourself. With that, she hurried off to take her place, leaving me standing alone among the last guests. Finding their seats. The string quartet transitioned to the traditional wedding processional, signaling the imminent start of the ceremony. I spotted Connor again, now seated in the front row next to an empty chair marked with a reserved placard. His eyes met mine, across the rows of decorated chairs, and a small smile played at the corner of his mouth. He made a subtle gesture toward the empty seat beside him, raising his eyebrows in silent question. The absurdity of the situation suddenly struck me with full force. My fiancé was seated in a place of honor at my brother's wedding, while I had been relegated to the kitchen. My mother hadn't even recognized the name of the man I was going to marry, despite his regular appearances in the Willowbrook society. Pages. My family had no idea that the important relationship Oliver had been cultivating was with the man who came home to me every night. As guests settled into their seats and the music swelled, I made my decision. I wouldn't hide in the kitchen. But I wouldn't create a scene either. Not yet. I quietly took a seat in the last row, beside an elderly great aunt who squinted at me through thick glasses before patting my hand absently. The ceremony proceeded with all the pomp and circumstance one would expect from a Lancaster Blackwood union. Oliver looked every inch the successful banker in his designer tuxedo. Penelope floated down the aisle in a gown that had undoubtedly cost more than most Willowbrook residents' annual salary. Their vows were traditional, their kiss appropriately, restrained for the conservative crowd. Throughout it all, I sat quietly, observing rather than participating, just as I had at every Lancaster family function since childhood, just as they had always preferred me to do. But as the recessional music began and the happy couple proceeded back down the aisle, I caught Connor's eye again. He gave me a subtle nod that conveyed everything I needed to know. The ceremony might have gone according to my family's perfect plan, but the reception would be an entirely different story. The reception was held in Willowbrook Gardens' grand ballroom, a soaring space with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking immaculately landscaped grounds. White roses and silver ribbons adorned every surface, complemented by ice sculptures and champagne fountains that screamed old money trying to impress new money. I lingered near the entrance, watching as guests filed in, their names checked against the seating chart by another coordinator with an earpiece and clipboard. From my vantage point, I could see the elaborate head table where Oliver and Penelope would sit with their parents and wedding party. Surrounding it were numbered tables arranged in a clear hierarchy of importance. The closer to the couple, the more significant the guests. The wedding coordinator who had tried to direct me to the kitchen earlier caught my eye and hurried over, looking harried. "Ms. Lancaster, we've been looking for you," she said in a hushed tone. "Your mother was concerned when you weren't in the viewing area for the ceremony." "I'm sure she was," I replied evenly. The coordinator consulted her tablet. "For the reception, we have you seated at—" She paused, her professional smile faltering slightly. "At the staff staging area near the kitchen entrance." "Your mother thought you might appreciate the privacy." I raised an eyebrow. "The staff staging area? You mean where the servers eat?" She had the grace to look embarrassed. "It's actually quite comfortable. There's a small table set up with the full dinner service and a video feed of the speeches and first dance." "How considerate," I murmured, scanning the room again. I spotted Connor near the bar, deep in conversation with Judge Harrington and Mayor Wilson. None of them had noticed me yet. "Shall I show you there now?" the coordinator asked hopefully. "The other guests will be seated shortly for dinner." I fixed her with a calm but firm look. "Actually, I think I'll circulate for a bit. Thank you for your concern." Before she could protest, I moved smoothly into the crowd, making my way toward a group of city council colleagues who were clustered near one of the elaborate floral arrangements. They greeted me warmly, several expressing surprise at my presence. "Elena, I had no idea you were related to Oliver Lancaster," said Councilman Rodriguez, our budget committee chair. "You never mention your family at meetings." "We're not particularly close," I replied with a practiced smile. "The Lancasters prefer banking to public service." "Well, they've certainly spared no expense today," commented Councilwoman Patel, glancing around at the opulent decorations. "I heard the flowers alone cost more than our annual parks budget." Our conversation was interrupted by the tinkling of a glass. The head of the catering staff announced that guests should begin finding their assigned seats for dinner. My colleagues wished me well and departed for their tables, leaving me standing alone once more. I watched as Connor was escorted to a table directly adjacent to the head table, Table 1, the most prestigious placement for non-family members. Seated with him were Mayor Wilson, Judge Harrington and his wife, State Senator Collins, and the publisher of the Willowbrook Gazette. The power table. My mother appeared at my side, seemingly materializing from nowhere. "Elena, there you are," she hissed, her smile fixed firmly in place for any onlookers. "Patricia has been looking everywhere for you. Your dining arrangement is prepared in the kitchen." "Yes?" I've been informed. I cut her off quietly. I won't be eating in the kitchen, Mother. Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. Don't make a scene, Elena. Not today. The Blackwoods have important announcements planned for during the dinner. Harold specifically requested that the focus remain on Oliver and Penelope's future ventures. Their future ventures, I repeated. You mean the old library demolition project? The one that's about to hit a significant legal roadblock on Monday? My mother's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. What are you talking about? Nothing that can't wait until Monday, I assured her. Though you might want to tell Harold to hold off on any definitive announcements about breaking ground next month. Before she could respond, the wedding coordinator appeared again, looking increasingly distressed. Mrs. Lancaster, the head table, is ready to be seated. And Ms. Lancaster, I've prepared your place in the— I know, I said firmly. But I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'll be joining District Attorney Mitchell at his table. Both women stared at me in shock. That's impossible, my mother finally managed. Table 1 is for Oliver's specially invited guests. The seating arrangement took weeks to perfect. I'm sure Connor won't mind, I said, already moving toward his table. My mother's hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. Elena, you can't just invite yourself to sit with the district attorney. You barely know him. He's here, in his official capacity as an honored guest of the Blackwood and Lancaster families. I had to bite back a laugh. If only she knew how well I knew every inch of Connor Mitchell. Let go of my arm, Mother, I said quietly, unless you want to create the scene you're so eager to avoid. Her fingers released me, though her expression remained stricken. This is Oliver's day. Your father and I have worked so hard to keep me hidden away? I finished for her. To pretend your daughter is nothing more than a minor embarrassment to be tucked behind a kitchen door? I've allowed that for years, Mother. Not today. I turned and walked directly toward table 1, leaving my mother standing open-mouthed behind. Me. As I approached, Connor looked up and our eyes met. A slow smile spread across his face as he stood, pulling out the empty chair beside him, the chair reserved for some important Blackwood associate who hadn't yet arrived. Council President. Lancaster, he said formally, though his eyes danced with private amusement. What an unexpected pleasure. Mayor Wilson beamed at me from across the table. Elena, I was just telling everyone about your brilliant handling of the downtown development grants. Please, join us. Judge Harrington looked up in surprise. Lancaster? Are you related to the groom? She's Oliver's sister, Connor supplied smoothly, holding my chair as I sat, though most people know her as the architect of Willowbrook's economic revival rather than by her family connections. The judge's eyebrows shot up. I had no idea, he said, studying me with new interest. Your brother has never mentioned your role on the council. Oliver and I move in different circles, I replied diplomatically, accepting the glass of champagne Connor poured for me. He prefers private banking. I prefer public service. And thank goodness for that, Mayor Wilson interjected enthusiastically. Your sister's preservation initiative saved the courthouse renovation project when private funding fell through, Judge, secured $3 million in federal grants that no one thought we could get. The judge looked impressed. That was you? I was told the Lancaster Foundation had stepped in. A common misunderstanding, I said with a small smile. The Lancaster name appears on many Willowbrook projects, though not always the same Lancaster. From the corner of my eye, I could see my mother engaged in urgent conversation with Harold Blackwood, both of them casting frequent glances in my direction. The wedding coordinator hovered nearby, clutching her tablet and looking distressed. I hope I'm not disrupting the carefully planned seating arrangement, I said to Connor, keeping my voice low. Not at all, he replied, his voice equally quiet. You're saving me from having to make small talk with Penelope's uncle, who was supposed to sit here, but apparently had a last-minute golf emergency. I laughed. then quickly composed myself as I noticed my father approaching the table. He moved with the confident stride that had intimidated banking competitors for decades, his smile practiced and impenetrable. "Elena," he said, stopping behind my chair. "I see you found your way to table 1. "Hello, Father," I replied calmly. Yes, District Attorney Mitchell was kind enough to offer me a seat. My father's gaze shifted to Connor, his expression calculating. "Mitchell, I understand you've been doing remarkable work cleaning up the East Side neighborhood. Oliver speaks highly of your efforts." Connor inclined his head slightly. "Thank you, sir. Though much of that success is due to your daughter's crime prevention initiatives. The community center she championed has reduced juvenile crime by nearly 30%. My father's expression flickered with something I couldn't quite identify. Confusion, perhaps, or disbelief. "Indeed," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Elena has always had progressive ideas about community involvement." "Progressive but effective," Mayor Wilson chimed in, apparently oblivious to the tension. "Which reminds me, Richard, I wanted to ask if you'd heard about our Monday announcement. It's going to change the landscape of Willowbrook politics for years to come." My father's attention snapped to the mayor. "Announcement? No, I don't believe. I have." Mayor Wilson grinned, slapping the table lightly. "Well, I shouldn't steal Elena's thunder, but let's just say Willowbrook is about to enter a new era of leadership." The implications of Wilson's statement hung in the air as my father's gaze swung back to me, his eyes narrowing slightly. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I saw genuine curiosity in his expression, not dismissal, not disappointment, but actual interest in what I might be involved with. Before he could question me further, the wedding coordinator appeared at his elbow. "Mr. Lancaster, we're ready for the parents' toast. Mrs. Lancaster is waiting for you at the head table." My father hesitated, looking between me and the mayor. "We'll continue this conversation later," he said finally, straightening his already perfect tie. As he walked away, Connor's hand found mine under the table, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You okay?" he murmured. I nodded, watching as my father rejoined my mother at the head table, leaning down to whisper something in her ear. She glanced in my direction, her expression a complex mixture of confusion and concern. "I think," I said, quietly to Connor, "that this is the first time in years they've had to consider that I might be more than they assumed." Connor smiled, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. "Just wait until they find out about us." The clink of silverware against crystal drew everyone's attention to the head table, where Harold Blackwood stood, champagne glass raised high. "Distinguished guests, family, and friends," he began, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Today, we celebrate not only the union of two extraordinary young people, but also the joining of two of Willowbrook's most influential families." As Blackwood launched into a speech about legacy and future prosperity, I noticed several reporters from the Willowbrook Gazette discreetly positioning themselves near the head table, notebooks and cameras at the ready. The major announcement about the library development was clearly imminent. Connor followed my gaze. "Is that why we brought the preservation documentation?" he asked under his breath. "Just in case," I whispered back. "Though I'm hoping it won't be necessary today." Mayor Wilson leaned across the table. "Elena, I've been thinking, with all these reporters already here, and all the important people in one room," he left the sentence hanging meaningfully. I shook my head slightly. "Monday, as planned." The mayor sighed but nodded his acquiescence. "Monday it is. Though I have to say, the look on your parents' faces when they find out would be priceless." As Blackwood's speech continued, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. For years, I had allowed my family to diminish me, to tuck me away in psychological kitchens and back rooms. I had built my career and my life in parallel to theirs, never intersecting, never challenging their perception. But sitting here, at the very table they had tried to keep me from, with the man they had no idea I loved, I realized that the time for parallel lives had passed. One way or another, by the end of this reception, the Lancasters would need to reconcile their imagined daughter with the woman I had actually become, and I was finally ready to step fully into the light. Harold Blackwood concluded his toast with a flourish, raising his glass high. And now, I'd like to invite you all to join me in celebrating not only this wonderful union, but also an exciting new chapter for Willowbrook's development. Oliver, would you do the honors? My brother stood smoothly, buttoning his designer suit, jacket with practiced ease. He looked every inch the successful banker, confident, polished, and completely in his element among the social elite. For a moment, I saw him through my family's eyes, the perfect Lancaster heir, following flawlessly in our father's footsteps. "Thank you, Harold," Oliver said, his voice projecting across the ballroom without effort. "As many of you know, Willowbrook has long been defined by its historic charm and small-town character. But today, Penelope and I are thrilled to announce a project that will propel our beloved town into a new era of luxury and prestige." At a gesture from Oliver, the lights dimmed slightly, and a projection screen descended from the ceiling. A the Blackwood Development logo appeared, followed by sleek renderings of a modern glass and steel tower where our century-old library currently stood. Presenting Blackwood Heights, Oliver continued, as gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience. 30 stories of premium luxury residences in the heart of downtown, featuring a rooftop pool, concierge service, and starting prices of just under $2 million. Connor's hand tightened around mine under the table. "Starting prices?" he whispered. "In a town where the median income is $60,000? I nodded grimly, watching as Oliver clicked through more images, the imposing tower dwarfing surrounding historic buildings, a sleek lobby with marble floors, penthouses with panoramic views of the town square. Lancaster Financial is proud to be the exclusive financing partner for this landmark project," Oliver announced proudly. "Construction begins next month, with the first residences ready for occupancy in 18 months. Next month." They were planning to begin demolition of the library in mere weeks. I felt a wave of righteous anger rising within me, but kept my expression carefully neutral. I hadn't fought for Willowbrook's historic district for 5 years to let it be destroyed by my brother's vanity project. "This development represents not just a new direction for Willowbrook," Oliver continued, "but a new partnership between the Lancaster and Blackwood families that will shape this town's future for generations to come." The projection changed to show a timeline with various phases of development. Phase 2 included demolition of the historic post office. Phase 3 targeted the old courthouse square, the very renovation project Judge Harrington had just thanked me for saving. From across the table, I could see the judge's expression darkening as he recognized his beloved courthouse in the future development section of the presentation. Mayor Wilson raised his eyebrows at me in silent question. I gave him a barely perceptible nod. Perhaps his announcement wouldn't need to wait until Monday after all. "Before we raise our glasses to this exciting new venture," Oliver said, "Harold has asked me to acknowledge some of our distinguished guests who will be instrumental in bringing this vision to life." He began listing names: banking executives, development partners, and finally, District Attorney Connor Mitchell, whose guidance on regulatory matters has been invaluable. Connor stiffened beside me, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. He hadn't provided any guidance to the Blackwood Lancaster project. In fact, he'd expressed serious concerns about their business practices during several of our private conversations. "And of course," Oliver continued, "we're honored to have Mayor Wilson with us today. His support for progress and development in Willowbrook has been unwavering." Mayor Wilson coughed delicately into his napkin, shooting me another meaningful glance. We both knew his actual position on luxury developments that priced out local residents was far from unwavering support. As Oliver concluded his presentation and the lights came back up, applause broke out, enthusiastic from the front tables near the Blackwoods, noticeably more restrained from the city officials scattered throughout the room. "Well," Connor murmured, leaning close to my ear, "that explains why they've been trying to court me for months. They're going to need someone friendly in the DA's office when the preservation lawsuits start flying, and they clearly have no idea who they're actually dealing with," I replied quietly. At that moment, Harold Blackwood approached our table, champagne glass in hand, with my father close behind him. They were both smiling, though I detected a hint of tension around my father's eyes. "Mitchell!" Blackwood boomed, clapping Connor on the shoulder. "What did you think of our little announcement? Revolutionary for Willowbrook, wouldn't you say?" Connor rose smoothly to his feet, his professional mask sliding into place. "Certainly ambitious, Mr. Blackwood, though I'm curious about the zoning variances you'll need for a 30-story structure in a district with a current 4-story height limit." Blackwood waved his hand dismissively. "Mere technicalities. With the right people involved, these things have a way of working themselves out." His gaze slid to me, then quickly away, clearly not registering me as anyone of importance. "Richard here assures me that the Lancaster connection opens many doors. In this town." My father nodded, though his eyes lingered on me curiously. "The Lancaster name has certainly afforded us certain relationships over the years." Mayor Wilson chose that moment to join the conversation, rising from his seat with a broad smile. "Speaking of the Lancaster name, Richard, I was just telling Elena here how excited I am about Monday's announcement." My father's expression sharpened with interest. "Yes, you mentioned that earlier. What exactly is this announcement, Wilson?" The mayor's smile widened. "Well, I'm not seeking re-election, as you know. Time for new blood in the mayor's office, someone with fresh vision and energy." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "And I'm thrilled to be endorsing your daughter as my successor." The reaction was immediate and profound. My father's carefully cultivated banker's mask slipped completely, revealing naked shock. Blackwood's champagne glass paused halfway to his lips, his florid face freezing in confusion. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother at the next table, her conversation with Penelope abandoned as she stared in our direction. "Elena?" my father finally managed. "Running for mayor?" "Not just running," Mayor Wilson corrected cheerfully. "Leading in every poll by double digits. The formal announcement is Monday, but I don't mind giving you all a preview." He raised his glass toward me. "To Willowbrook's next mayor, a Lancaster who truly understands what this town needs." Connor lifted his glass as well, his eyes meeting mine with pride. "To Elena Lancaster, Willowbrook's future." Judge Harrington and the others at our table joined the toast, though their expressions registered varying degrees of surprise at this apparent family revelation. My father recovered quickly, years of boardroom negotiations kicking in as he forced his features into a semblance of pleased surprise. "Well, this is unexpected news. Elena never mentioned political aspirations of this magnitude." "Didn't she?" Mayor Wilson asked innocently. "As council president, she's been my right hand for 2 years now. Masterminded the downtown revitalization, secured federal funding for the historic district, led the affordable housing initiative. I'd have thought you'd be following her career with interest." Blackwood was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time, his expression calculating. "Lancaster," he muttered. "Council President Lancaster. You're that Lancaster?" "The very same," I confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. "The one who's been blocking our development applications," he continued, his voice hardening. "The one behind the historic district designation that's cost us millions in potential revenue. I prefer to think of it as preserving Willowbrook's character and ensuring development benefits all citizens, not just luxury condo buyers," I replied calmly. My father looked between us, pieces visibly falling into place in his mind. You've been opposing Blackwood developments all this time? Not opposing, Father. Regulating. Ensuring they meet community standards and preserve historic structures. I took a sip of my champagne. Like the library Oliver just announced they plan to demolish. Blackwood's face darkened. That project has been approved. The paperwork is already in process. Actually, I said, opening my clutch bag and extracting the Preservation Committee report. As of yesterday, the library has been nominated for historic landmark status. The committee vote was unanimous, which means no demolition permits can be issued until the full review is complete, a process that typically takes 12 to 18 months. Oliver had appeared at Blackwood's side, his expression shifting rapidly, from confusion to alarm as he grasped the situation. Elena, what are you doing? My job, I replied simply. Protecting Willowbrook's historic buildings and ensuring development serves the community, not just investors. You can't just unilaterally block a major development project, Oliver protested, looking to our father for support. Tell her, Dad, the financing is already in place. We've got investors committed. Not unilaterally, I corrected. The Preservation Committee includes representatives from the Historical Society, the Architectural Review Board, and 3 city council members. Their recommendation goes to the full council on Monday, where it will almost certainly be approved. Blackwood's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is a direct attack on my family's business, on your brother's project. This is the standard review process for any development affecting historically significant properties, I countered. Something your lawyers would have explained if you'd consulted them before announcing demolition plans at a wedding reception. Connor stood up beside me, his presence calm but authoritative. Mr. Blackwood, perhaps this isn't the best venue for this discussion. As Elena mentioned, there are established procedures for reviewing development proposals that affect historic properties. And who exactly are you to advise me on procedure? Blackwood demanded, turning his anger toward Connor. District Attorney Mitchell, Connor replied evenly, who you just publicly credited with providing guidance on your project, despite the fact that I've never discussed it with you or your representatives. My father's gaze shifted between Connor and me, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. You two know each other. Connor nodded, his shoulder brushing against mine as he stood tall beside me. Quite well, actually. Elena and I have been together for nearly 2 years. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother had abandoned all pretense of disinterest and was now openly staring at us from the next table. Oliver's mouth had fallen, slightly open. Blackwood looked as though someone had just informed him his vintage wine cellar had been flooded. Together? My father repeated, the word seeming foreign on his tongue. As in engaged, I clarified, finally allowing myself to slip the emerald ring from my clutch bag and onto my finger, where it caught the light from the chandeliers overhead. For the past 3 months, Mayor Wilson, who had been watching this family drama unfold with barely concealed delight, clapped his hands together. And what wonderful news that is. Willowbrook's next mayor and our distinguished district attorney. What a power couple you'll make. My mother had risen from her seat and was making her way toward us, her social smile firmly in place, though her eyes betrayed her shock. Penelope followed close behind, her bridal glow somewhat diminished by the unfolding drama. As they approached, I realized the moment I had both anticipated and dreaded for years had finally arrived. The carefully constructed worlds of the Lancaster banking dynasty and my own political career were about to collide completely, and nothing would ever be the same again. My mother reached our table with remarkable composure, considering the circumstances. Years of navigating social landmines had prepared her for maintaining appearances, even while her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. Penelope hovered at her side, the perfect bride's smile now strained at the edges. Elena, darling, my mother said, her voice honeyed but tight. What a lovely surprise about your political aspirations. And your engagement. She turned to Connor with a brittle smile. Mr. Mitchell, I had no idea you and my daughter were acquainted, let alone engaged to be married. Connor offered his hand with perfect professional courtesy. Mrs. Lancaster, I've been looking forward to formally meeting you. Elena has told me so much about her family. My mother's smile flickered. Has she? How interesting. We've heard so little about you. That's hardly surprising, I interjected. Smoothly. We haven't exactly been in regular communication, have we, Mother? A flash of something, guilt perhaps, or simple discomfort, crossed her face before she regained control. Well, this certainly explains why you were so insistent on not using the kitchen seating arrangement. From the corner of my eye, I saw Judge Harrington's wife raise her eyebrows. Kitchen seating arrangement? She echoed, the question hanging in the air like an accusation. My mother flushed slightly. A simple misunderstanding with the venue coordinator. We thought Elena might arrive late and wouldn't want to disrupt the ceremony. So you had her seated in the kitchen? Judge Harrington asked incredulously. Council President Lancaster, who single-handedly secured funding for my courthouse renovation? As I said, a misunderstanding, my mother insisted, though her composure was clearly fraying. She turned back to me, dropping her voice. Elena, we should discuss this privately. This is Oliver and Penelope's special day. Oliver stepped forward, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. There's nothing to discuss privately. Elena has apparently been secretly working against our family's interests for years, against my project with the Blackwoods. Not against the family, Oliver, I corrected calmly. Against reckless development that would harm Willowbrook's character and displace residents who can't afford $2 million condos. Who appointed you the town's moral guardian? He demanded, his voice rising slightly before he caught himself, and glanced around at the watching guests. You've never shown the slightest interest in the family business. You walked away from everything Dad built. To build something of my own, I finished for him. Something that serves this community rather than extracting wealth from it. Harold Blackwood, who had been watching this family drama with growing impatience, cut in sharply. This is all very touching, but it doesn't change the fact that your sister is actively sabotaging a multi-million-dollar development deal. I'm enforcing existing preservation laws, I replied evenly. Laws that were in place long before you decided to target historically significant buildings for demolition. Laws can be changed, Blackwood countered, his voice low and threatening. Especially when the right people are convinced it's in their interest. Connor straightened beside me, his posture shifting subtly from relaxed to alert. Are you suggesting something improper, Mr. Blackwood? He asked, his district attorney's tone emerging. Because as the county's chief law enforcement officer, I'd be very interested to hear exactly what you mean by that. Blackwood backpedaled, immediately forced charm replacing the momentary threat. Simply that public opinion can influence policy, Mitchell. Nothing more. My father, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, finally spoke. Elena, is this why you left Lancaster Financial? To position yourself against our business interests? The question hung in the air, loaded with 5 years of misunderstanding and missed opportunities. I looked at my father, really looked at him, and saw not just the intimidating banking magnate, but an aging man genuinely confused by the daughter he had never bothered to understand. No, Father, I said, my voice softening slightly. I left because I wanted to build something meaningful on my own terms. The fact that our visions for Willowbrook's future are different is simply a reflection of our different values, not a personal vendetta. Different values, he repeated slowly. You make it sound as if our family's work has no value. It has tremendous value. For shareholders and clients wealthy enough to access your services, I acknowledged. But Willowbrook is more than a collection of investment opportunities. It's a community of people who deserve affordable housing, preserved history, and public spaces that aren't privatized for the highest bidder. Mayor Wilson, who had been watching this exchange with interest, chose that moment to interject. The Lancaster Blackwood Library development would remove Willowbrook's only public library and replace it with luxury housing that less than 2% of our residents could afford. Elena's preservation initiative ensures we don't lose crucial community resources to benefit only the wealthy few. Penelope, who had remained silent until now, suddenly spoke up. But my father's development would create jobs and increase property values across downtown. While displacing the small businesses that give Willowbrook its character, I countered, gently. The same small businesses that participated in the revitalization initiative I led, which has already created more jobs than your father's projected development, and without demolishing historic buildings. I could see the calculations happening behind Oliver's eyes. My brother had always been quick with numbers, able to assess financial advantages and disadvantages in an instant. Now he was realizing that his sister, the family disappointment, the one who'd walked away from Lancaster Financial, had actually built substantial political power in Willowbrook. Power that could potentially block his first major joint venture with his new in-laws. "You're really running for mayor?" he asked, his tone somewhere between disbelief and grudging respect. "The official announcement is Monday," I confirmed. "But, yes. And you're engaged to the district attorney." This wasn't a question but a statement as he reassessed everything he thought he knew about me. Connor's hand found mine again, our fingers intertwining visibly on the table. "For 3 months now," he confirmed, "though we've been together much longer." My mother's gaze fixed on our joined hands, then on the emerald ring that now sparkled openly on my finger. "That's Grandmother Mitchell's ring," she observed. Recognition, dawning. "I've seen it in photographs from charity events." Connor nodded. "It was my grandmother's, yes. She was quite insistent that it should go to Elena when she met her last Christmas." "Last Christmas?" My mother's voice rose slightly. "But we thought you were alone for the holidays. You said you couldn't come to Aspen because of work commitments." "I did have work commitments," I confirmed. "The winter homeless shelter initiative that made national news. And after that, I spent Christmas with Connor's family at their lake house." The realization that I had been building not just a career, but a whole life completely separate from the Lancaster orbit seemed to hit my mother all at once. Her perfect posture faltered slightly as she reached for the back of a nearby chair for support. "All this time," she said softly, "we thought you were struggling, living in some small apartment, working some minor government job. Your father offered to help so many times." "I didn't need help," I interrupted gently. "I've owned my Victorian on Maple Avenue for 3 years now. The restoration won the Historical Society's Preservation Award last spring." My father's eyebrows shot up. "The Maple Avenue Victorian? That sold for over $1 million. $1.2 million, I corrected. A sound investment in a historic district with protected property values." A waiter approached our increasingly tense gathering, looking uncomfortable. "Excuse me, but the chef has asked if guests could please take their seats. The main course is ready to be served." Harold Blackwood waved him away impatiently. "This is more important than dinner. We need to discuss how to handle this preservation issue immediately." The waiter hesitated, caught between Blackwood's dismissal and his professional obligations. "Sir, the bride and groom should be seated for dinner service to begin." Penelope touched her father's arm. "Daddy, please, we can discuss business tomorrow. It's my wedding day." Something in her voice, a note of genuine pleading, seemed to reach Blackwood. He exhaled heavily, forcing his features into a semblance of social pleasantness. "Of course, Princess. Business can wait." He turned to my father with a meaningful look. "Richard, perhaps we should continue this discussion after dinner, in private." My father nodded, though his gaze remained fixed on me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't the dismissive look I'd grown accustomed to over the years, nor was it the proud recognition I'd once craved. Instead, it was something closer to reassessment, as if he were seeing me clearly for the first time. "Elena," he said finally, "perhaps you and Connor would join us for that discussion." The invitation, the first sincere acknowledgement of my professional standing my father had ever offered, hung in the air between us. Before I could respond, Oliver stepped forward. "She should join us," he said, surprising everyone. "If Elena's going to be mayor and she has concerns about the project, we should address them directly." He looked at me with a complex expression. No more working at cross purposes without even knowing it. "I'd be happy to discuss alternatives that preserve the library while still allowing for appropriate development," I offered, deliberately keeping my tone professional rather than adversarial. My mother, who had been watching this exchange with growing concern, suddenly seemed to remember we were standing in the middle of a wedding reception with hundreds of guests observing our family drama. She straightened her shoulders and fixed her social smile firmly in place. "Well, this has certainly been illuminating," she said brightly. "But Penelope is right. This is a celebration, not a business meeting. Elena, Connor—" She faltered slightly over his name, still adjusting to the idea of him as a future son-in-law, rather than just an important political figure. "Please, enjoy your dinner. We can sort all this out tomorrow." As my parents and the Blackwoods returned to the head table, I noticed the wedding coordinator hovering nearby, clutching her tablet. With white-knuckled hands. "Ms. Lancaster," she said hesitantly, "we seem to have a, seating discrepancy. You're now at table 1, but we don't have a place setting for you." "That's easily remedied," Connor said smoothly. "Elena can share my dessert, and I'm sure the kitchen can provide another entree." Of course, she agreed, visibly relieved that at least one crisis could be easily resolved. "I'll have it brought right away." As she hurried off, I turned to Connor with a small smile. "Well, that was illuminating," he suggested, echoing my mother's word. "I particularly enjoyed the moment when your brother realized his sister is about to become his project's biggest regulatory obstacle, while dating the district attorney who could investigate any attempt to circumvent those regulations," I added, allowing myself a moment of satisfaction. Mayor Wilson chuckled as he retook his seat at our table. "I've known your father for 20 years, Elena, and I've never seen Richard Lancaster caught off guard until today. When I mentioned you were leading in the polls, I thought he might actually drop his champagne glass." Judge Harrington leaned in, his expression curious. "So they truly had no idea about your position on the council, your mayoral campaign, or your relationship with Connor?" "The Lancasters have a remarkable ability to see only what confirms their existing beliefs," I explained. "They decided years ago that I was a disappointment, so they simply stopped looking." Connor's hand found mine under the table again. "Their loss," he said quietly, "and Willowbrook's gain." As the waiters began serving the main course, I caught Oliver watching me from the head table, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Penelope whispered urgently in his ear while her father engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with mine. The perfect Lancaster-Blackwood union was showing its first cracks, barely hours after the vows had been exchanged. The kitchen where they'd tried to hide me now seemed a distant memory, replaced by the uncomfortable reality that the daughter they'd dismissed was about to become a powerful political force they couldn't ignore. And as Connor raised his glass in a private toast just between us, I realized that emerging from the shadows of my family's expectations felt better than any election victory ever could. The remainder of the wedding reception unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance, where half the participants had suddenly changed the steps. Waiters served exquisite food that many guests were too distracted to fully appreciate. The string quartet played elegant classical pieces that competed with the hushed conversations spreading throughout the ballroom. News of my mayoral candidacy, my relationship with Connor, and the clash over the library development rippled from table to table, transforming a celebration of matrimony into a hotbed of Willowbrook political intrigue. I ate my hastily prepared entree with measured calm, answering questions from our tablemates with diplomatic poise. Yes, the preservation initiative had been in development for months. No, I hadn't deliberately kept my candidacy secret from my family. They simply hadn't asked about my career in years. Yes, Connor and I had met at a community development meeting, bonding over shared visions for Willowbrook's future. From the head table, I could feel my mother's gaze returning to me repeatedly, each glance carrying a different emotion: confusion, reassessment, and occasionally something that might have been regret. Oliver maintained a practiced smile for photographs, but his eyes kept darting between me and Blackwood, clearly calculating how to salvage his development project. Penelope's perfect bridal glow had dimmed noticeably, her expression tightening each time another guest approached to congratulate her, while stealing glances at our table. As dinner plates were cleared away and the cake-cutting ceremony approached, Connor leaned close to my ear. "Your brother's heading this way, alone." I looked up to see Oliver weaving through the tables toward us, his expression surprisingly determined rather than angry. He reached our table and cleared his throat awkwardly. "Elena, could I speak with you? Privately?" I exchanged a quick glance with Connor, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. "Of course," I replied, rising from my seat. Oliver led me to a small anteroom off the main ballroom, closing the door behind us to muffle the reception noise. The space was elegantly appointed, clearly designed for the bridal party's pre-ceremony preparations, with gilded mirrors and plush seating. He paced for a moment before turning to face me. 5 years, he said finally. 5 years of barely speaking, and all this time you've been… What? Secretly building a political career? Planning to become mayor? Dating the district attorney? Not secretly, I corrected. Just separately from the family. There's a difference. Is there? He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a rare gesture of genuine frustration I hadn't seen since we were children. Dad mentioned you at every quarterly meeting, you know. Has anyone heard from Elena? Is she still working at that government job? This revelation caught me off guard. He asked about me? Of course he did. We all did. But you never came to family events, never returned calls properly. Just those brief, polite emails at holidays. The last time I attended a family dinner, Oliver, you all laughed when I talked about my council aspirations. Mother suggested I focus on suitable charitable work instead. Dad offered me an entry-level position at the bank, again, despite my master's degree. Oliver had the grace to look slightly abashed. We didn't understand what you were building. You never tried to understand, I countered. But without the bitterness that would have colored such a statement years ago, it was easier to dismiss me as the family failure. He was quiet for a moment, studying me with new eyes. And now you're going to be mayor. If I win the election, yes. According to Wilson, that's practically a certainty. I shrugged. Nothing's certain in politics, but my polling numbers are strong. Oliver paced again, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. And this library project? There's no way to salvage it? I considered my answer carefully. Not as currently designed. A 30-story luxury tower that demolishes a historic building and provides no community benefit? No. But a mixed-use development that preserves the library facade and includes affordable housing units? That might pass the Preservation Committee's review. He stopped pacing, his banker's mind clearly assessing this alternative. Blackwood won't like the affordable housing component. He's fixated on ultra-luxury. Then he'll continue to face regulatory obstacles, I said simply. Willowbrook's zoning codes and preservation ordinances aren't suggestions, Oliver. They're legally binding protections for our community's character and accessibility. My brother studied me for a long moment. You really believe in all this, don't you? The preservation, the affordable housing, the community development. It's not just a political platform for you. It's why I left Lancaster Financial, I confirmed. Banking. Serves those who already have money. I wanted to serve those who needed an advocate, including the small businesses and middle-class families being priced out of the town they've called home for generations. Oliver leaned against an antique sideboard, his expression thoughtful. You know, when you first left, Dad was furious. Not just disappointed, genuinely angry. I thought it was about you rejecting the family business. But now, I wonder if it was because he saw something in you that he'd never seen in me. What do you mean? The courage to build something completely new. He gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. I've always followed the path laid out for me. Lancaster Financial was my destiny from childhood. I never questioned it, never considered alternatives. But you, he gestured toward me. You walked away from guaranteed success to start from nothing. Not nothing, I corrected gently. I had my education, my determination, and eventually the support of people who shared my vision for Willowbrook. Different resources than Lancaster connections, but valuable ones. Oliver nodded slowly. People like Mitchell. Connor was one of the first to take my preservation initiatives seriously, I acknowledged. But our relationship grew from shared values, not political convenience. And now you're getting married. He shook his head, a rueful smile playing at his lips. My little sister, engaged to the district attorney, about to become mayor. Meanwhile, I'm married for all of 3 hours, and my first major joint venture with my in-laws is on the verge of collapse. It doesn't have to collapse, I said carefully. It just needs to evolve into something that benefits Willowbrook as a whole, not just its wealthiest residents. Oliver studied me, banker's calculation giving way to brotherly curiosity. Where have you been living all these years? Mother was convinced you had some tiny apartment near City Hall. I smiled. I bought the Eldridge house on Maple Avenue 3 years ago, the Victorian with the wraparound porch and original stained glass. His eyebrows shot up. That place sold for just over $1 million, I finished for him. My investment firm has done well. Your investment firm, he repeated slowly. Elena Lancaster Investments? I nodded. Small but select client list. We focus on historically significant properties and sustainable development. ELI, he murmured. I've heard of you. Commercial real estate circles. The firm that renovated the old textile factory into that tech incubator. He looked genuinely impressed. That was you? And the Riverstone Bistro building and the teachers' housing complex. On Oak Street, Oliver ran a hand through his hair again, laughing softly. My God. All this time we thought you were struggling, and you've been out there building a real estate portfolio that actually rivals some of Blackwood's holdings. The difference is, my properties maintain Willowbrook's character while providing actual community benefits, I pointed out. Not just profit. And yet they still turn a profit, he observed shrewdly. You haven't abandoned business principles entirely. I never said capitalism was inherently evil, Oliver. Just that it needs to be balanced with community good. Successful developments can do both. A knock at the door interrupted us. Connor poked his head in, his expression apologetic. Sorry to interrupt, but they're about to cut the cake. Penelope is looking for you, Oliver. My brother straightened, smoothing his suit jacket and resuming his role as the polished groom. Duty calls, but Elena. He hesitated. This conversation isn't over. I think we have a lot of catching up to do. I'd like that, I said, surprised to find I genuinely meant it. As Oliver headed back to his bride, Connor slipped his arm around my waist. Everything okay? Better than I expected, I admitted. I think my brother just realized I'm not the family failure after all. Progress, Connor murmured, pressing a kiss to my temple. Though anyone who ever thought you were a failure clearly wasn't paying attention. We returned to the reception just as the elaborate 5-tier wedding cake was being wheeled out to the center of the dance floor. Cameras flashed as Oliver and Penelope posed with the silver cake knife, their society smiles firmly in place despite the tension clearly simmering beneath the surface. My father caught my eye across the room and, to my surprise, gave me a small but deliberate nod of acknowledgement. Not quite approval, but recognition, perhaps for the first time in my adult life. After the cake cutting, the band started playing, and the dance floor opened. Connor led me smoothly into a waltz, his hand warm against the small of my back. "You know," he said conversationally as we moved among the other couples, "in about 6 months, when you're sworn in as mayor, I'm going to enjoy reminding everyone that they once tried to seat you in the kitchen." I laughed softly. "Ancient history." "Speaking of history," he continued, his expression growing more serious, "Mayor Wilson pulled me aside while you were talking with your brother. He's concerned about potential ethics issues if the Blackwoods try to challenge the preservation initiative." "Because of our relationship?" Connor nodded. "He thinks we should be prepared for them to suggest conflicts of interest." The mayor engaged to the district attorney, both opposing a major development. "They can suggest whatever they want," I replied. "All my council votes and initiatives are on public record, most of them predating our relationship. And you've recused yourself from any cases involving my projects since we started dating." "I know that, and you know that," Connor said. "But perception matters in politics. Wilson thinks it might be wise to move up our wedding." I raised an eyebrow. "For political reasons?" His logic is that a married couple faces fewer ethics questions than an engaged one. Something about established relationship status versus the appearance of ongoing personal negotiations. Connor's eyes crinkled with amusement, though I suspect he just wants to officiate before his term ends. The music shifted to a slower melody, and Connor drew me closer. Around us, other couples moved across the dance floor, including my parents, who were maintaining appearances with practiced dignity despite the evening's revelations. "So," Connor murmured against my ear, "what do you think? City Hall ceremony, before the election? Small family affair at Christmas? Or wait until after your inauguration and do something more public?" I considered the options, watching as Oliver and Penelope performed their obligatory first dance, their expressions suggesting their minds were far from the romantic moment. The Blackwoods and my parents standing side by side at the edge of the aisle dance floor, their alliance visibly strained by the evening's developments. Something small, I decided. At the Victorian. Just people who genuinely care about us, not political connections or family obligations. I smiled up at him. And definitely, before the election. Not for Wilson's political calculations, but because I don't want to wait. Connor's arms tightened around me. "I like that plan. Though I am curious who from your family will actually attend now that they know who you really are." "Time will tell," I said, watching as my mother's gaze found us again across the dance floor, her expression unreadable. 5 years of assumptions don't disappear in a single evening. "No," Connor agreed, "but 5 years of accomplishments can't be ignored either. Not anymore." As the music drew to a close, Mayor Wilson approached us, grinning broadly. "Sorry to interrupt your dance, but I've just had the most interesting conversation with the Willowbrook Gazette. They'd like to do a feature on Monday, the district attorney and the mayoral candidate, Willowbrook's new power couple." I exchanged a glance with Connor, who nodded his encouragement. "Monday works," I agreed. "Excellent," Wilson enthused. "Oh, and Elena, your father just asked me for your business card. Said he'd like to discuss some alternative proposals for the library site. I think your family is finally starting to realize what the rest of Willowbrook already knows." "What's that?" I asked. The mayor's smile widened. That underestimating Elena Lancaster was the biggest mistake they ever made. As we moved off the dance floor, I caught sight of the wedding coordinator directing servers through a side door, the entrance to the kitchen where my family had tried to seat me just hours earlier. The thought no longer stung as it once might have. That kitchen table had been meant as a place of exclusion, but instead had become the final catalyst for my emergence from the Lancaster shadow. Sometimes, the most significant transformations begin in the most unlikely places. For me, it had started 5 years ago when I walked away from Lancaster Financial to forge my own path. But it had culminated today, when my family's attempt to hide me away had instead forced them to finally see me, truly see me, for the first time. And that visibility, that recognition, was worth more than any seat at their table could ever be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.